What's going on, everyone? Welcome to YouTube Live today. This is Golf Thursday, so I'm Sean Fitzgerald, one of the personal trainers here at the Upper Valley Aquatic Center. So, like always, go ahead, like, subscribe, and kind of tag along and share and chat, see what we can do to answer any questions, kind of talk about any certain topics that we might be missing or that you kind of want to hear and that we can kind of dig up and chit chat about. So, we're gonna keep continuing through different parts of the body, kind of talk about some common injuries, a couple drills that we can help maybe alleviate a little bit of pain and things like that. So last week we kind of covered foot and ankle, kind of went over a couple things that can happen to our golfers and what we can do to strengthen our ankles and things like that. So we're gonna kind of move up into the chain and we're gonna go into our hips. All right, so you think about it, it's we talk, a lot of people are like, oh, well, what do you need hips for golf? Like, all you're doing is just like swinging and you're not really doing a whole lot. And well, so for some people, it's there's a lot of internal and external rotation around the hip, right? So, you take this as, my fist is my, say your femur, your thigh bone, right? For, things like that to make it easy. And, here is, the upper part of your hip. So if you touch your side right here, you kind of feel a little bump, right? All right, that's, we'll categorize that as our hip, right? So we're going and we look like this, right? And then, the femur kind of moves in and around like that, right? So that allows us to have a lot more range of motion, with our lower extremity, right? So, shoulders the same way, but it's not, the humerus isn't completely enclosed. It's a little pulled back a little bit to allow a little bit more freedom, but the head, it's a ball and socket, and basically we have a lot more movement, right? So a lot of things that we kind of run into is that a lot of golfers might not be able to actually, really move, so they have no hip mobility, right? So the hip is a joint that is supposed to be mobile. We're supposed to have a lot of freedom there, right? So if your hips aren't mobile, you're not able to get maybe a swing or a more powerful swing that you might be looking for. So because we need to be able to really get us to turn and to kind of drive our hips through and go through, right? So, when you look at some of these, top golfers, take a look at where their hips are aiming, right? Where they want the ball to go. That's normally where their hips are. And take a look at where their feet are planted and how much really rotation that they got, right? So, basically when we think about it is you're going from, if you're up north, right? You're going from not playing all winter to, basically swinging, rotating, right? You're not doing anything with your hips in the off season. So you're not going to have maybe that flexibility, that little bit of mobility, right, to get you going. Or, if you're down south or out west, where you get to play a little bit more, you might actually start developing, like you might have, some good range of motion, but your hips might bother you because everything else around you might be a little bit weak, right? Maybe your glutes are weak, your hamstrings are weak, hip flexors are weak, right? So those are things that you're going to want to, play around with. So your off season, you're kind of working on that stuff, building up that mobility, building up that strength, and that's what we want to capitalize, right? So what things, we kind of want to look at, if you think about, so I'm a righty, right? I'm here, and when I come back, right, I'm trying to keep everything nice and, straight and going forward, right? Like I'm here, right? And it's my thoracic that is kind of, spinning back this way. But then when I come through, right, it's my hips leading the way, right? And I want to be able to basically get my hips facing in that direction that I want, right? That's going to put a lot of stress on someone that, one, may not have warmed up properly, right? You might have just done a lot of practice swings and here you go, we're going to go play 18, and theoretically, you're looking at maybe 3 to 4 swings each hole, unless you get yourself into trouble and then you're going to start capitalizing, basically adding on to that, right? So, you want to think over the course of 18 how much you're spinning, how much you're twisting, how much you're kind of putting that pressure in, your hips, whether you're righty or lefty, right? So what do we want to do? Like a couple things is, are you able just to hip hinge regularly, right? Like in everyday life, we should, be able to basically come here and we should be able to hinge our hips completely out. Because what happens with a lot of people is they basically do this. They kind of squat down and then they round their back, right? So they're not able to actually have a proper hip hinge. So there's no movement within that midsection that you like. So first we want to be able to make sure that, hey, can we even do that, right? And then we also pelvic tilt, right? Are you able to take this belt buckle, right? Imagine you got one of those rodeo belt buckles, right? And are you able to just basically rotate, your pelvis back and forth, right? That's one of the tests that, we do with, our screenings, right? So we're basically trying to rotate our pelvis back to like, posterior and anterior, right? So those are one of the things, because if we're in our 5-iron stance, right, we want to be able to arch my back, a little bit of a round arch, right? So see how much movement you've really got, right? So, learn to kind of control that, see what it feels like, see where it pulls on, see what hurts, what doesn't hurt, right? So, and, other aspects is we're basically, I'm in just, half feeling stance of it, and I'm stretching my hip flexor, right? That's where a lot of people are going to actually be really tight. So it might not come down to you have to stretch it. You might actually have to strengthen it. It's another area that you want, or we'll probably have to look into, right? But majority of people that are constantly sitting most of the day, every day, right? So I'm just kind of stretching in, and it's basically just a half kneel, and I'm just leaning forward, all right? Some people might be able to go a little farther. Some people, you might just be sitting and like just in your kneel, and you're going to feel it and things like that, right? So those are real simple exercises that you can do to kind of help start getting this area, right around your hip flexor area, to start and get a little bit more active, right? So another one, put this camera right on down. There we go. Right, is just gonna use this little bottle that I got right here, right? And all I'm doing is, what kind of movement do you really have in your hips, right? My feet are kind of, they spread out a little bit, but all I'm doing is I'm trying to be upright as best as I can, and I'm just trying to pick my hip up over the bottle, right? Some of you might feel in your hand, in your hand, you'll be like, oh, I can't, like, my hamstrings are feeling it, my hip flexor is too tight, right? So it's kind of going to be like, which side's worse, right? I'm up straight here, and I'm like, ooh, looks like my left side's worse, right? So those are things that you're going to want to kind of focus in on and be like, all right, if my left is work, I'm going to want to do a little bit more on that area to help get me where I want to be, right? So those are a little bit of mobility, a little bit of stretching. And another one that you're going to want to really do is really what I kind of call is your hip burnout, right? So we want to actually do exercises that start to not only get you moving, but it strengthens at the same time, right? So I'm literally doing, straight leg, leg raise. You can go resistance band, you can go ankle weight, things like that. And, just any type of movement like this. So here's your straight leg raises, into your clamshells, right? And, basically a kind of like side laying fire hydrant, right? That's, you're basically doing those movements to help strengthen the outer part, the outside part of your hip, like right around this towel, right? So it's going to burn, that's why I kind of call it a hip burnout, right? But it's not a pain. That's where you need to kind of figure it out, right? We're not doing something to cause pain. We're doing something that, hey, like if it's getting tired, you're going to feel it. You need to keep working at it, right? And really we want to stay right around, a light resistance to start, like your lighter color bands, like your greens, right? Go your oranges, like, go light and figure out what your tolerance is, right? And then, stay around that 8 to 10 rep range while you do it, right? Because it's easier to add, right? If you don't feel it the next day, or, there is really no soreness, or, you don't think you hit it right. Like you can always add a little bit the next time, right? But if you go like straight into a heavy band, like you might not be able to walk the next day because you're just gonna tax that area so bad that you're just like, whew, a little tender, right? So those are a couple things that you want to keep in mind, right? Is I'm doing something to help my game, so don't overdo it. It takes me away from my game, right? So basically start with your light color bands, right? 8 to 10 reps, and you just do one rep after another. So do your straight leg, clamshell, and then your fire hydrants, right? Go 10, 10, 10, boom. All right, hit the other side. See which side is worse, right? See which side tires faster. See which side might have more of a burn, right? So those are all things you want to keep in mind when you're doing it. So, I hope that kind of helps a little bit. So the hips, we can go all day with the hips. There's a lot more that we're going to cover, so we're probably going to dive into it, next week. But basically, here's the start of a strength, a little bit of a strengthening. So you can literally do this anywhere, right? So you can do it at your gym. You can do it for a warm up before a gym, right? It's a good little, warm up to get you primed and ready, right? You can do it in the office. You can do it at the driving range, right? Home in the living room. You can do it with a band, without a band. There's all sorts of things that you can do. So you do it without the band, just kind of increase your reps to maybe like 12 or 15. Maybe do it a couple times, right? Kind of judge what you feel and what you don't feel, right? So a lot of that will, is going to be based off of what you do already in your current program. So, keep that in mind. If you're doing a lot of hip-based stuff, like maybe you'll be a little tired, maybe you'll be a little stronger. So it's all playing game, right? So, keep that in mind. But hip mobility and hip strengthening is pretty critical because that's the start of, where your power is going to start to come from. That's one area that you want to look into to help give you maybe a little bit more, right? So hope this little tidbit kind of helps. Next week we're going to come back and we're going to throw in a couple different more exercises to, for you to experiment with, see what you like, see what you don't like, and, see if it helps anything like that. So, when it's, just keep it simple. Doesn't have to be all too crazy and things like that. So, try these out, test it, see what works, see what doesn't work, and then we'll come on back and we'll throw a couple more at you and see if that kind of helps for you. So, like always, thanks for tagging along. So go ahead and like, subscribe, right? So we can get out there and you can share some information and chit chat and everything like that. And if you're ever up north in the Upper Valley, don't be shy. Come on in and have a little chit chat with us and see what we can do. But hope you all have a good weekend. All right, it's coming on up. Looks like it's going to be a nice one. So hopefully you can get on out and play. And hey, try some of these routines in this episodes and see what works. All right, you guys enjoy your weekend. We'll see you all next week.